Good evening, my friends. Welcome. Thank you for joining me. Let's see if I can get the date right this week. It is February the 8th, not March, 2026. I made a mistake last week, and oh boy, did I hear about it. Anyway, welcome. I'm glad you're here. Just a couple things I wanted to make mention. As I've said this before, I make a living by the tours that I lead and by the books that I sell. I just wanted to let you know that coming up this September, leaving on September the 10th, is an American history tour that goes all the way from Boston to Jamestown. You're going to hear a lot about America 250 this year, and rightly so. It is time that we remember our founding principles, our origins as a nation. So I'm going to be leading a tour. Land in Boston and tour all the historical sites from Boston down through Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., into Virginia, Richmond, Jamestown, all of that. And it is going to be a wonderful tour. I can hardly wait. And I'm inviting you to come. If you'd like to come on that tour is through Fun for Less. Now, in October, believe it or not, I'm going back to Israel. Yeah, I know, you think I'm crazy. I was there on October 7th, on the day that the war started in Israel. But I've been eager to go back ever since I left. And so this coming October, I am taking a group back to Israel. We're going back to the Holy Land on both sides of the Jordan, where we will read the scriptures in a way we never have before. I can't wait. Do I think it's safe? Well, I feel safer there than most of the places I travel in the world. And that why? Because my friends take care of me. They keep me out of trouble. I can't wait to go. And I'm inviting you to come with me. Now, for both of these tours, the America 250 tour and Israel in October, call 801-619-1022. That's Fun for Less, 801-619-1022. Tell them that Glenn sent you. Or just go to funforlesstours.com. Either way, those two tours I wanted you to take note of. They're very exceptional tours, and I'd love to have you come. Okay, tonight, can I ask you to have a prayer in your heart for me and for those who might be listening, that something might be said tonight that would be inspiring, do some good. Now, this first story I'm going to share with you has everything to do with how you do come follow me, how you read the scriptures. For example, how many times have you come home from church and said to yourself, I need to know my scriptures better? And off you go, studying extra hard. Then after a week or two, the goal of becoming a scriptorian sort of goes the way like New Year's resolutions. Well, if you've ever struggled with loving the scriptures, then I have a story I want to share with you. It was a long time ago. I was a young missionary and going out to my mission field in the Midwest, and I flew out. And I remember the first time on that trip flying over the Colorado Rockies, February 1982. It was awesome. I'd never seen those mountains from the air. My nose was pressed against the window all the way over the Rockies. They were fascinating to me. But then, as the years went on and I just kept flying, in fact, I've flown so much now that even flying over the Rockies at any time of the year, I hardly even open the windows anymore to look down. It's boring. I have come to the conclusion, this is just me, but I've come to the conclusion that looking at the mountains from 35,000 feet, well, that's a little like getting a kiss from your beloved through a window. It's nice, but Something's missing. Well, here's my story. Years ago, my daughter and I decided that we were going to run Hurricane Pass in Idaho and Wyoming. Now, Hurricane Pass goes right up over the Teton Mountain Range, right by the Three Tetons. The trail starts in Teton Canyon near Driggs, Idaho, goes right up over the range and comes down near Jenny Lake in Wyoming. It's aptly named Hurricane Pass because the wind really blows up there. But it's a 22-mile journey across that range. When Sharice and I weren't going to hike it, we were going to run it. So, on the appointed day, the family dropped us off at the trailhead and the two of us set out. Now, to be honest, we didn't run the entire 22 miles. Some of that trail was just too steep and too rugged, but we did run a good portion of it. We ran through the thick pine forests along the valley floor, and I do love the smell of the forest, the pine. Then we began to climb up the open hillsides laden with wildflowers that time of year. They were beautiful. And then there were the high mountain lakes way up there and the rocky terrain above the tree line. Oh, man, it was gorgeous. Finally, we reached the top of the range, crossed over the Skyline Trail, and started down. I remember the view from up there and the cool, clear mountain air. Oh, it was wonderful. Now, up to this point, our journey had been nothing but fun. But that changed when we started down the other side. The trail was steep and it was rough. There were places we couldn't safely run. As it was, my daughter rolled her ankle twice before we got off the mountain, and we ran out of water. And the worst thing of all, we didn't time it right. Darkness fell before we reached the lake. The entire run, especially the last part, was a struggle that brought us to the point of exhaustion. We hurt so bad. The last few miles, we were walking. Why? Because it was too dark to run and we had no light. And to keep us going, we were leaning on each other and singing sacred music just to keep us motivated. By the faint beam of the light which was dying on our cell phones, we finally made it to the family and to safety. We were absolutely exhausted and in pain, but happy because we did it. We did it, and we would do it again. We experienced every sight, sound, smell, and step of the Hurricane Pass Trail over the Teton Mountain Range. Now, I've seen the Rockies and the Tetons from the air, but nothing compares with being body, mind, and soul in them, not above them, in them. Joy in those mountains is made on the ground, not flying over them, but up close, not from a distance. Mountains are like scriptures. You have to get down in them with your nose only inches from the page, figuratively speaking, your fingers on the paper, your marking pencil going 100 miles an hour. Too many of us read our scriptures like jet travel. We settle into a comfortable seat and off we go, eager to get to the other end. But inevitably, we doze off, right? Well, where's the passion? Where's the quest? Where are the questions, what you're looking for? Where is the sensory experience of the topography of the scriptures, of the characters? Where's the story, the drama, the history that lies just beneath our fingers in the scriptures? If you want to really experience your scriptures, slow down. Bend your back. Put your nose to the page, figuratively speaking, and start exploring every word, every phrase, every character, every story. Dive beneath the surface. It will take time. You can't jet to the end. It will be frustrating at times, maybe even painful. But I promise you, it will affect you. When it becomes less a duty and more a passion, it will change you. The scriptures will, if you do this, invade your senses, just as the smell of pine and forest did me in the Tetons. How will you know when it's working, when you're doing it right? Well, probably because when you read the scriptures this way, your tears will mark the margins. Next story. I'm indebted to Jared Ashby for sharing this story with me. Sometimes we don't realize, you know this, that we're being moved and guided by the hand of the Lord. The following is an illustration. It was September 28th, 2018. Jared's children were home from school. The decision was made by the family that they would go up into the canyon to get firewood. So they invited a family friend, Robin Burnett, to go with them. The next morning, as they pulled out, Jared looked at the clock. It was 8:55 a.m. They were 5 minutes early. It's a miracle, Jared said to himself. We got everybody loaded up and out of the driveway 5 minutes before I had planned on it. End of quote. Now his plan, this all takes place near Logan, his plan had been to go up the right-hand fork of Logan Canyon because, quote, he knew of several good firewood trees that would be easy to load up. Jared says when we got to the right-hand fork, the thought came to his mind, you can get those trees later. You need to go to Temple Fork, end of quote. So without arguing, Jared continued up the canyon and on up to Temple Fork. Went right past the first turnoff he'd planned on. They hadn't gone very far up Temple Fork when they came to a suburban parked skiwampus in the road. As they stopped, Jared thought to himself, what's going on? Just as they came to a stop, someone jumped up on the other side of the suburban. Something appeared to be wrong. Robin and Jared jumped out of the truck and went around the vehicle. There, lying in the road, was an injured man. Jared described, quote, a young man had been riding his horse off the steep embankment down to the road. The horse had stumbled and fallen head over heels, which had catapulted the young man face first onto the road, with the horse landing on top of him. He had fractured several bones in his face. His one wrist was fractured, and he'd also fractured his hip from the horse landing on top of him. End of quote. The guy in the Suburban had stopped to help, and it appeared was praying for help when Jared and Robin pulled up. They got the injured man in the Suburban and gave him a blessing. While Robin went with them to take him down to the hospital, Jared took the family and went on up into the canyon to get firewood. They later learned that that injured young man was named Benjamin, and that he lived just a few miles down the road from them, and that he was scheduled to report to the Missionary Training Center to begin his missionary service in just 2 weeks. After discussing the extent and severity of his injuries, Jared commented, that he would likely not be reporting to his mission in time. 2 weeks later, at a stake conference, who should they meet getting out of the car and going into the meeting? Walking on crutches was Benjamin. He was recovering rapidly, and he made his scheduled arrival at the MTC. Jared said it best. I know that we have a loving Heavenly Father who knows our needs before they even become a need and can prepare things to take care of all the problems we face in life. I am so thankful that I listened so that I could be an instrument in God's hands. End of quote. And indeed, don't push back at those gentle little impressions, because they might actually be from the Lord. Next story. I love Hawaii. In fact, Christine and I are going back. We're going back next January 23rd. We're going back to Hawaii with an even bigger slate of activities and food and fun than we had this year. January 23rd, 2027, we are going back to Hawaii. Make a note of it and call Suzanne at Amazing Vacations USA. Put your name on the list. I can't wait to go back and take you there. Now, one of the stories that I learned while I was in Hawaii this last time, we came home last night, is this one. It's a fascinating sight to see. Every evening there in Honolulu, rose-ringed parakeets, birds, they fly in from all over the city of Honolulu and out of the surrounding Kualau Mountains. They fly down to a specific banyan tree down in the city, and they gather there by the thousands, chirping and calling and making all kinds of racket. And then, just as it gets sunset, just as it's getting dark, on some unknown signal, the parakeets move next door to another banyan tree, and there they all settle by the thousands into this tree. And then, as the darkness falls, the parakeets become quiet for the night. The following morning, just at dawn, the parakeets launch themselves out of the banyan tree and scatter out across the city and up into the Kualau Mountains, where they will spend the day feeding, only to repeat the cycle that night. I find the whole thing utterly fascinating. I've seen things like this before here in Utah with crows, but there I didn't expect to find it. Now, this is what's interesting. Where is it that this multitude of parakeets gather in such huge numbers for safety, refuge, and rest? Answer. On the grounds of the Honolulu Tabernacle, there in Honolulu, Hawaii. On June 30th, 1935, the Hawaii steak was created, becoming the first steak created outside the continental United States. Ralph Woolley was named as the first stake president. It had 6 wards and 6 branches, but no building large enough to accommodate a gathering for the steak. President Woolley felt that the church needed greater visibility and a more prestigious image there in Hawaii. Accordingly, a bold design plan was sent to church headquarters for approval. Harold Burton of Los Angeles was hired to create the plans. Burton was a member of the church. In an unusual move, he relocated temporarily to Hawaii and took up residence in a small, termite-laden shack on the property that would one day be where the tabernacle is. Why did he do this? Because he wanted to get a sense and a feel for the property and create something in the design that was befitting of this unique location. The first thing that Burton determined was that there were 3 very large trees on the property and that they should remain. The banyan tree still does. It was believed at that time to be the largest banyan tree on the island. Now, his designs for that building went beyond just functional. They were unique. They were original. No church building then or since would look quite like this one. And funding, it had to be paid for by the members of the stake. So a funding assessment was given out to each of the units in the church. Interestingly enough, the first branch to return the full measure of their assessed amount were the saints at Kalaupapa, the leper colony. They were the first to pay for a building they would never walk into. When it was done, the tabernacle was not one building, it was 5 magnificent structures, adorned with a 141-foot tower at the center, at the time believed to be the second highest on the island, and a stunning mosaic outside over the front entryway, portraying the Savior with arms outstretched. It's beautiful. Well, it was dedicated by President David O. McKay on August the 7th, 1941. It would be the last tabernacle to be built in the church. The workmanship of the building was exceedingly fine. The concrete and the wood, the acoustics of the building were noted as exceptional. Interestingly, during the dedicatory prayer, President McKay prayed that the tabernacle would be preserved from the bombs and missiles of war. Miraculously, 7 months later, though it had been targeted, it was spared any destruction. Today, this historic tabernacle still houses 7 units of the church, wards and branches. 7 wards and branches meet there every Sunday. Truly, if you know the scriptures, that stake is a refuge, a place of refuge, safety, and rest, a place of gathering, which I find interesting, not just for the Lord's people, but for his creations as well. Next story. This story is for your Come Follow Me, and it comes out of this book right here, Old Testament Stories. If men were art, well, some of them would be masterpieces. And I don't think anyone would argue with me if I said Moses was a spiritual masterpiece, a man of faith and integrity. He was, as history would prove, one of the greatest prophets who ever lived. And I would like to share with you an experience that I've told many times over the years, which I think illustrates why Moses became such a great man. It's a simple story. When God came to Moses and called him to lead Israel out of Egypt, Moses' initial reaction, you remember, was something like this. Me? You want me? In response to that, the Lord assured Moses that he would be with him, but still, Moses was self-doubting and he was reluctant. Now, can you blame him? He was a lowly shepherd boy, a wanted man in Israel, or in Egypt rather. And God was calling him to go back? Finally, the Lord Almighty decided that to demonstrate to Moses was better than trying to explain. So, in mid-conversation, he said to Moses, "What is that in thine hand?" Exodus 4:2. And Moses answered, "A rod." The Lord then commanded Moses, "Cast it on the ground," which Moses did. And that rod, that stick, that became a serpent. Now, this is the part of the story that I really like, and it's my point. It says, and Moses fled from before it. Moses was afraid of snakes. I get that. I don't like snakes. The Lord then said to Moses, and I believe this is the story, this is the moment that changed everything. He said to Moses, "Put forth thine hand and take it by the tail." Exodus 4:4. Now, there's a rattlesnake slithering across your front room. The Lord says, pick it up. Pick it up by the tail, no less. Would you do it? Not sure I could. I get squeamish. I don't even like spiders. To his everlasting credit, the record says that Moses put forth his hand and caught it, and it became a rod in his hand. End of quote. Obedience. Through this and other experiences of faith and obedience, Moses went on to greatness. He became the great lawgiver that is revered around the world even today. But at one point, Moses was just an ordinary man until that day when God called upon him to face what he feared and trust in a higher power. That's faith. What does it mean for you and me? It means we start small too. Even now, when I don't know why, and I don't know how, and I'm scared to death about what's going to happen, the Lord commands me to obey, to trust Him, to go forward with faith. That's how history changed for Moses. That's how history will change for you. This next story comes out of this book, recently released. And in connection with America 250, this book is available now. Actually, we sold out the first printing. The second one's in process right now. It'll be available shortly. But this story comes out of this book, and it is, as I see it, essential to know and understand this story if you're going to understand the background of the American founding. John was born December 24th in the year 1166 at Beaumont Palace in Oxford. He was the youngest son of King Henry II of England and Eleanor of Aquitaine. John's older brothers were Henry and Richard, the same who would be called Richard the Lionheart, and Geoffrey, Duke of Brittany. John's sisters were Matilda, Leonora, Joan, and Eleanor. As John grew up, he earned the scornful nickname John Lackland, because as the youngest son of the king, it was to follow that he would not inherit land or titles, those would go to his brothers. John received a good education in all things expected of a royal son in England, including the arts of war. Now, at that time, there was much intrigue and there was a lot of contention in the royal family, with mother and older sons rebelling against King Henry II. The rivalry and power struggle were intense between John, particularly, and his older brother Richard, especially after the oldest brothers died, leaving Richard in line for the throne. John, however, remained loyal to his father, the king, in those last years, while Richard and Geoffrey rebelled against the king. Perhaps this gave John something of the sense of entitlement that he would manifest later. Well, in due time, the king died, and Richard assumed the throne. Richard the Lionheart assumed the throne in 1189. And right after, he set out on the Third Crusade to the Holy Land, to deliver the Holy Land from the infidels, as it were, leaving behind trusted regents to manage the kingdom. While in Richard's absence, John fomented trouble and rebelled against the authority of his brother. Richard returned to England in 1194 and learned what John had done. Well, a reconciliation took place between the two brothers. In 1196 AD, Richard passed away. And John, though unlikely one, came to the throne of England in 1199. Almost immediately, King John angered the French, who seized the lands that English owned on the continent. John, in return, launched an expensive military campaign to take them back. He lost. That angered the English nobles who held title in those lands and had supplied him the soldiers to fight the war that he lost. In 1205, King John of England got into a scrap with the Pope, and the Pope subsequently excommunicated John and put out a decree of an interdiction against all England. England was Catholic at that time. Because of John, no one in England was allowed to have church worship services. And now, not just the nobles, but the citizenry, the people, and the clergy are up in arms against John. Then, a rebellion broke out in Wales due to heavy taxes and military conscription. The discontent spread over the island. Then in 1213, John made a sudden turn and declared loyalty to the Pope, and agreed to make all England a papal fief, if you will, and pay tribute to Rome. Well, that angered his people even more, who saw that as a surrender of English sovereignty. In other words, everywhere John turned, he did it wrong. He was arbitrary. He was a tyrant, cruel to his people. And finally, in 1215, it came to a head, and the barons and nobles of England rebelled against the king. They had been pushed too far for too much, and they took up arms against the King of England. In May of 1215, the nobles, the barons, captured London and forced John out into the country to negotiate. In their minds, he had levied too many taxes and gone too far in his duties, arbitrarily fining them and confiscating their lands as he felt like it. He had cost them land, wealth, and their rights of worship. In short, they believed he had too much power. So June 15th, 1215, King John and his entourage met the barons in a neutral ground for negotiations. It was a meadow, a cow pasture, if you will, beside the Thames River called Runnymede. There, King John was compelled to sign a document that limited his powers and guaranteed the rights of the barons. You see this? for the first time in history, the absolute power of the king was broken, and that the people took back the right to govern themselves. It was the beginning of it. Well, no sooner had John signed the document than he rebelled against it and sought to rescind it. He even persuaded the Pope to annul it, but it was too late. It had been written, it had been signed. It could not be disappeared. Well, in the minds of the people, no longer was the power of the king absolute and unlimited. He would answer to the people. Neither he nor any man going forward would be above the law. All men had inalienable rights that could not be denied, but by due process of law. It started with the barons of England. It would continue. It would spread. That document would be renewed again and again and laid before subsequent kings, rulers, and monarchs in England. Its principles would forever, and I do mean forever, change the world. That simple document in a cow pasture in England was called the Magna Carta. Its principles and its sentiments would catch on, would grow, and be magnified, line upon line, and would be influential in creating and writing the Declaration of Independence and the United States Constitution and free governments around the world. Interesting, to say the least, that out of one man's infamous tyranny came the truths and the principles that set you free. Last story for tonight. I'm afraid, and I'm pointing the finger at myself as I say this, but I'm afraid that sometimes we are not sufficiently meek and lowly of heart in our prayers, especially as our pain intensifies because of the circumstances of life, making our urgency in prayer almost demanding. When we hurt, it is normal and natural to seek relief from the pain. And emotional and spiritual pain can become some of the worst of all. We may turn to God seeking relief. Now, He always hears us. He always answers us. However, the relief we want may not come when we want or the way we want, and often does not come for an extended period of time. The pain goes on. When heaven does not respond as we ask, even in faith, the faith of some is crushed beneath dashed expectations. Where is He? We cry, and why doesn't He care? Why doesn't He answer me? And this is the line that hurts most of all. How can a loving God stand by and let such suffering continue? You ever been there? You ever felt this? I have. I do. Question for you. Is unremitting pain always a bad thing? And where does it say that God is obligated to take it away when we ask Him to? And that just because He loves us, He has to take our pain away? Where does it say that? I've never read that. In fact, I've read just the opposite. Notwithstanding, I'm afraid there are still too many of us that pray to God with more of what sounds like marching orders than supplications. May I speak to you for just a moment? And again, pointing the finger at myself. One day, Jesus came into Cana of Galilee, where he was met by a nobleman. This man's son was dying. He was desperate. He begged Jesus to come down now and heal his son. Well, that son was 20 miles away in Capernaum. The father wanted Jesus right then and there to travel that distance and presumably lay his hands on the boy and heal him. Now, what happens next is intriguing. Instead of commending this man for his faith in coming to Jesus in the first place, he chides the man, saying, "Except ye see signs and wonders, ye will not believe." Something in this man's heart was not right. Well, to his credit, the man was not offended by Jesus' words, but rather persisted, saying, "Sir, come down ere my child die. Come now before he dies." Now, why did Jesus rebuke him? It could be because this man is so like so many of us. He comes to God for help and tells him where, when, and how he wants that help to be delivered. In his mind, unless Jesus was physically there in Capernaum, the boy could not be healed. But Jesus is so much more than this man ever imagined him to be. He is the Lord of the universe, having all power and all knowledge. With him, indeed, all things are possible. Jesus said to the man, "Go thy way, thy son liveth." Jesus was not going to go to Capernaum, not going to follow the man's request, but out of compassion, he gave the grieving father his wish. The man, the father, believed on the Lord's word and set out for home. On the way, he was met by his servants announcing that his son was on the mend. When he asked them at what hour the boy began to heal, they answered, the 7th hour, the exact same moment that Jesus had spoken. The man had gotten far more of a miracle than he asked for. He went for a miracle and came back converted. He and all of his household. Lesson learned. Brothers and sisters, there is no limit to God. He can do anything for us that he wants to, if by our trusting faith we will let him and give him time. His ways are not our ways. They're always better. His timing is always better. And no one understands time and timing better than our eternal Father. Therefore, I think you can see what I'm saying, that to surrender to God in faith with our prayers is to set both you and him free. It isn't just words when we say and mean it, "Thy will be done." That means what he does and when he does it is better than your idea. Good night, dear friends, and God bless. Just a parting thought. Those of you that go to Israel who can make a journey like that, you'll never read the scriptures the same way.